So, a warm welcome everybody and welcome to the next panel today. So we will now talk about how to navigate the ramp-up strategies for success in a competitive market. And I'm really happy to introduce the panel today. So I'm really happy that we have a very interesting panel or really interesting panelists today on stage. So I will start on the very right side from my side, so from your side on the left, of course. It's Dr. André Walter. He's the CEO of Airbus Aerostructures GmbH here from Hamburg. Then we have Barbara Zetterberg. She is the supply chain director from the Boeing company. And we have Dr. Jörg Schuler. He's the CEO of Diehl Aviation. So my name is Bernhard Lietzmann. I'm partnered in Genix AG, and I'm really happy to moderate the panel today. So when we are talking about competitive market and all the challenges we have today, we are talking about supply chain disruptions, we are talking about workforce shortages, new regulatory compliance, digitalization and environmental sustainability. So we have a lot of panels today and yesterday also coping with really, I would say, similar topics. But what I'm really curious about is what is your personal side on that? Maybe just as a starting question, maybe you can say what is your personal biggest challenge at the moment in the current phase of the ramp up? And Andre, maybe you can start. And please only name one challenge.
That's a difficult question, but I would say long-term view, despite of the disruptions we have here and there, it's really skilled people. I think that's one of the most important things which will ensure our future. And we see that for sure we have a drain of technicians and engineers worldwide. You know, we are located here in Germany, but also we are a European company, and we see it also on our other sites to really get more people interested in technologies and to be, let's say, then be hired for the aviation industry in total. And I think that's also the situation for all the suppliers, for the whole supply chain. That would become more and more difficult.
Okay, thank you very much. Barbara, from your perspective.
Along the same lines of workforce, it's the workforce at our suppliers. How do we help them enhance their workforce? Especially in the Puget Sound and down in California, it is a very tough labor market. So we were looking at creative ways where we work collectively with the suppliers, with outside agencies on staffing, so we can provide the people for the ramp up. So it's more of an external view. I think internally, we've started to see our skilled workforce come back, and it's now really focusing on that external workforce.
Okay, so it's also a workforce topic for you, mainly.
Yep.
Okay. Jörg?
The biggest challenge I see are supply chain disruptions. If I follow supplier on-time delivery performance or product quality, that's certainly the biggest issue which we are faced with, I would say. If you look, and we heard it in the panel before, material availability, then it's resource shortages in the supply chain, but it's also inflation are causing these disruptions. And if you combine it with the material cost, the labor cost, the cost of transport and energy, in combination with the high interest rates, we are faced with a lot of insolvency or risk of insolvency. So we are far away from a real resilient supply chain.
Okay. So we have a big problem in terms of supply chain, the resilience, the people, availability of resources and materials. When we have a look on the disruptions at the moment, and we are looking at the production ramp-up plans, which are quite steep on Airbus side, but which are of course also challenging on the Boeing side. What is from your perspective the major pain points on that when we talk about production ramp-up in the really near future, beside the workforce topic? Barbara, maybe we.
I would echo what Jörg said, and the supply chain resiliency and ensuring that our supply chain is looking into the future and identifying what they need to meet those ramp ups. identifying those items early so we can work together to solve, right? Do you understand the requirements in front of you? Do you understand that your sub-tier supply chain can manage those requirements? If they can't, have you raise that help needed to us so we can work with you to solve the problem? Because you can't solve a problem you're not aware of. So it's really working with our suppliers to look that longer term view of, are you doing what you need to do to get ready for those rate ramp ups? You know, ordering your materials ahead of lead time, ensuring your standards are available. Have you mapped out and are you talking to your outside processing houses about what they're going to see coming from you? So it's really that upfront planning to prepare for the future.
Thank you very much. Jörg, is it the same view you have, or do you have, as a tier one, a different view on this topic?
Not really. If I look at the supply chain disruption, and it was nicely in the first panel, I mean, it first starts with a strong collaboration between OEM, tier one, and then down to all the tier levels. It's a lot linked to transparency. Then obviously the demand management, so properly cascading the OEM information on rates, on demands down into the supply chain accurately is key. For me, that's the prerequisite that we can manage a ramp up at all. And then building on that, you have several aspects. You can do your run at rate exercises, you know, from your own facilities, but you translate it down into the sub-tiers. You need elements of mitigation. We heard it earlier. I mean, we are building currently buffers. We are building consignment stocks in order to have the material already with us. We are focusing on last time buys to mitigate obsolescence. So there are a lot of mitigation actions you can put in place. And then obviously there are some other tools which are obvious. In order to de-risk the ramp up, you go for dual sourcing wherever you can. And sometimes it's not possible. Then at least you try to go for several sites, not to put the risk into one site. So there are several tools you can apply to mitigate the risk, but it goes all along what Barbara said at the end as well. So basically the requirements from the OEM we translate down into the lower tiers.
Thank you very much. Andre, I've also a question to you. It's also a question from the panel, so we can combine it, or from the audience. At the moment, we see a lot of demand in the aviation industry. So we have defense, business, commercial aviation. Is it a problem for you, or is it a risk from your perspective in terms of capacity management that the demand is so strong today?
I would clearly say yes, because I think it's the first time, like already indicated in the question, it's the first time that we are all ramping up. So defense business, commercial aircraft, and on top, we are ramping up all of our programs at the same time. I think also that is the first time that we do it. So you can take it as from the positive side. It's a good signal for the overall industries in aviation. So we are growing. That's a chance for sure, but it's also a challenge, because if we are looking back, so let's say 3-4 years back looking, my day-to-day job was production, only production, and I put my hand in the storage and the part was there, and more or less the system was running well. If we see it today, system is much more complex. And we see it also with all the panels here. If you take all the topics which we are discussing during these days here, it's really demonstrating how complex the system is. So you have interruptions in raw material, supply chain in general. We have more and more demanding regulations from the commissions, from the authorization authorities, and we have a more and more unstable world. So we have to manage much, much more. In parallel, this ramp up in all the programs and all these different businesses of aviation. And this is really demonstrating that The system is complex. The signals which are going in the system are unstable, and I think we can only overcome, answers already given here also in another question, if we collaborate and exchange and discuss this topic openly and having really the view whenever an issue is coming to tackle it as early as possible. But do we have an alternative? We cannot say no. We cannot say we stop ramp up. We cannot say we are not delivering because our customers want our products.
Barbara, you're fighting every day that you get the right material as a supply chain director. From your view, from your point of view, because you're traveling also to a lot of suppliers at the moment, what are the keys to stabilize a constrained supply chain in the current situation?
It's the theme that has been talked about these past several days, transparency and collaboration. We are traveling at all levels of the company out to our suppliers to help understand what the issues are. Are we giving you the right demand? You know, we have complex systems, things happen. Are we having you build something that we don't need? Are you not building something we need? So really understanding, are we giving you the right requirements? And then now how do we allocate the raw materials across to ensure everybody gets what they need? So we have a really collaborative raw material team that works with suppliers to understand everybody's need to make sure materials are getting where they need to go, right? That was one of the first things that we did as we started to see the big constraints in some of these raw materials is, hey, give us where you're short. Let me work with the mills and I'll get you what you need, right? Everyone's not going to get everything, but you will get something. And we can't have those conversations without interacting with our suppliers, being collaborative, transparent up front. And again, going back to getting out there and walking through, do you understand what you need to build? Do you have what you need? How can I help you? You know, because there are, as we've talked about, there are a lot of challenges in the supply chain. So it's really working across to come up with collaborative solutions to help.
For the collaboration, would you say it's more a technical issue or it's more a human issue? Do we have to talk more to each other or can we find a technical solution?
It's both. We absolutely need to talk more to each other. And as we're coming out of the pandemic and people, we are traveling more, it's really reestablishing those face-to-face human connections. Because we survived during the pandemic via phone calls, Zoom, team meetings, but it doesn't replace that face-to-face contact of establishing that relationship with people to solve problems, right? I mean, we're all aircraft companies. We move people to solve problems, right?
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a very interesting question from the audience. Several times the production ramp-up was discussed on the Aviation Forum. What changed and how sure are you that it will really come? And one additional question, what lessons learned do we take from the past? I think, Andre, this is a question in your direction to Airbus. Maybe you can answer, or Jörg, you are also really deep in the supply chain for Airbus at the moment. What is your view on that?
I do not know how often it was discussed, but for sure we have a lot of discussions around it, and I remember very well that this is one of the questions which was asked very often, are you sure it will really come? And the answer is yes, it's coming, and we are already in between, so we cannot say we stop. And we have the demands from the market. It's a question of the request from our customers, but it's also a question of the request of related to sustainability, to have new aircraft on the market which are consuming less energy. So that's really important, and we cannot avoid it. Have we learned from the past? I would say yes. Answer was partly given by Barbara and Jörg already. So we are using buffer stocks. We are really managing the full chain. I think that was not so intensive in the past done. We have to really look on the full value chain. For sure, we have maybe a little bit more complex situation in comparison to the past because The surroundings are a little bit more difficult to manage. And here we need to come together and to manage these issues. But there's no way out. The ramp up needs to be done.
To jump on Andre's remark, I think, yes, we learned a lot. Ramp up is coming. We learned a lot from the past. But in reality, this ramp up, as Andre alluded a bit earlier, is much more complex because all OEMs are ramping up and the world around us, it's much more volatile than ever before. I think that's the big difference. In the past, in reality, every OEM was managing its tier 1, every tier 1 was managing its tier 2. Today, we are going even to tier 3, tier 4 in order to ensure the robustness of the supply chain. We are not only focusing on the next tier, so creating this transparency, knowing where is the weak point in the chain, that's certainly very different to what we did in the past. So that volatility and the disruption, I mean, through all these geopolitical disturbances which we have, there was no lessons learned from the past, and we need to adapt to what we are facing today. So as I said earlier, we had to learn how to overcome the limitation of transportation, which was never the case in the past. It was always running like a clockwork. Now, this is a focus item. So I would say it's not necessarily looking into the past, what we have learned, yes, apply, but it's more to anticipate what could go wrong and then set the right actions.
Okay. Thank you very much for the insight. When we talk about how to prepare the ramp up, we are always discussing initiatives, action plans all around the world. So if you are in Seattle region or if you are in Europe, everywhere we are talking about, yeah, we have to do something, we have to start initiatives. But Jörg, for you as a tier 1, how do you as Diehl, how do you build a sustainable and competitive position while ramping up? Because afterwards, after the initiative is done, how do you secure that we will have a sustainable production scenario afterwards?
It's the other sustainable, right? It's the other sustainable. It's the long-lasting. I mean, for me, one of the key words is operational excellence. If you create a system for long-lasting, you need to live the operational excellence throughout the full value chain. So, and we are trying to anchor our actions throughout the value chain. And I mentioned a few points before, but it's also re-establishing the thinking of lean, for example, making it again part of the culture. We realized that during COVID, we were focusing only on recovery and we were forgetting some of the basic elements because we tried to be hands-on. Now we need to re-establish a lean culture, for example, in the organization to make it part of the day-to-day work. For me, that's one example to be competitive. Then I would say we still, as a cabin supplier, you are faced with a lot of changes, volatility simply through customization. Nevertheless, there is the need, if we want to have a sustainable ramp up, to focus more on reuse of standardization and modularization. Also things which we were not always focusing in the past. For me, another element where we could really become better and sustainable. So there are some elements. Then we spoke earlier in the sense of we are missing talents. So the question is, where can we get talents from? So internationalization for me is another element. Where are the pools of talents which we can source from in order to have the right people with the right skills in the right quantity, and being more flexible globally. So make use of globalization on the one hand side, but also potentially use this internationalization to mitigate transportation. Local sourcing can be another key word which you could apply at the end to make the whole system more robust. So just to mention a few examples.
Okay, thank you very much.
I can jump on this, and I think Jörg is fully right. We are always sometimes we have the tendency always looking for sophisticated solutions. And which is for sure also a tendency and important, and we should more invest on digital data exchange, data management, yes. But we need also in some areas come back to our basics. Really having an operational system which is really working well, where we can really follow the production system with lean, with our Airbus operation system. I think Boeing has more or less the same. So these basics we need to bring back, and we lost it a bit also during COVID, because everyone was in a hurry and it was more the modus to survive. But today, first basics and then sophisticated solutions.
Barbara, when we talk about this topic, as a supplier, what would be your wish? What does it take to be a differentiator for customers?
You know, we always want to lead with quality and safety. So that is, you know, our first focus is, are you producing quality product for us? You know, we then look for, you know, best value, right? It's not always lowest cost. It's what is the best value suppliers to bring to us? You know, on time, sustainability, collaborative. Are you doing what you need to do to differentiate yourself from your other suppliers to bring those quality products to us?
Mm. And a lot of attendees here in the audience and also here on the panel. So we are sitting every couple of weeks in an airplane. How do we secure the quality during the ramp up? Because when we're talking about the steep ramp ups everywhere in the world on OEM, on supplier side, how do we secure that really quality is coming out at the end of the day?
It goes back to what I talked about earlier. Do you understand your requirements? So Boeing has spent some time enhancing how we go through those requirements with suppliers, right? Do you understand, you know, the full technical requirements to build this part? Do you have that network? Do you have the infrastructure? It really starts up front with that quality planning, right? When you get those parts, you know, assessing, do you have the right tools, the right people, the right skill set to build that part, and building quality in and not just inspecting at the end.
Maybe to jump on it, because Andre said it, let's go back to the basics. There are tools, I mean, the systematic application of APQP, for example, FMEAs, DFMEAs, PFMEAs, make it simply part of the day-to-day work, and then automatically both the product but also the industrial process will get more robust and better. So, and then you create quality.
Sounds easy.
Sounds more easy than it is, but first of all, we have all these basics in hand. Secondly, we can learn from other industries. And there's a question written somewhere about automotive industries. I think the performance of the supply chain and how they are really steering the supply chain, there's something where we can learn from. And they have really very, very, let's say, close tracking and close flowing of the information through the supply chain from tier something to tier one. So that's something we need to work on.
And Airbus has changed in I think it was last year, the organization. So the Airbus Aerostructures have been founded. Why was this necessary? Why did you have to change the company structure? And what are the next moves? Can you give us some insights in that? Because sometimes it's hard to understand what was the reason for that reorganization.
Yes, I can understand it's sometimes hard to understand reorganizations, and in our business we organize maybe sometimes too often and too fast. But here really, and we are not alone with the Airbus Aerostructures, we have also our colleagues from Airbus Atlantic, and the idea of the company was really to focus on the structural work more and to combine all the plants who are doing this work. Yes, you can ask, would it have maybe more make sense to combine one company, so French and Germany in total, and not a French company and a German one. But at least we were in our ecosystem and our political system was not possible. But we see clearly the advantage already today because we have all the plants in one organization, let's say practically sitting together every week, discussing the full value stream and discussing also how we manage giving the signals to the supply chain and manage the demands under the plants. This is something which is really enabling us to go back to these basics which we have mentioned before. And that was the reason why, because we see Aerostructures are becoming back to core. It's also with the new aircraft generation we will produce and we will develop. And that was the reason why we focus now back all plants in one hand, much more easier.
Okay. Your biggest concerns at the beginning, and it was from all of you, was the topic of workforce, attracting workforce. So we are also seeing, especially in the US, a very steep increase of the salaries. For me, it's a very critical question also. How is your company attracting and retaining talents, especially in the critical areas like engineering and manufacturing, like you mentioned it before?
You, me?
We had a goal this year of really ramping up our engineering capacity, and we've done that. And part of how we've done that is utilizing, our global talent. We have engineering centers in multiple countries. How do we use them more efficiently? We've had a concerted effort of recruiting, partnering with universities to bring in the talent we need, especially the technical talent. So it's been an effort, and we are on track to meet the goals that we said we would do, bringing in the additional engineers, manufacturing, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Andre?
In Germany, we have, I would say, a good tradition and a good system existing, which we are using a lot. It's our own apprentice. So we have increased the number of apprentices over the last years. We have more than 1,000 in the system. And on top, we are using in Germany the system of dual students. So half doing studies, half working in the company. I make it simple. And these people are also directly linked to the company already. So they are part of this apprentice system. So here we are generating our own talents. But for sure, we need to attract also people to go to the universities and do studies on new technologies. We have had a discussion on sustainability. We will have for sure further discussions on H2 technology or CO2-free flying. All these technologies can only be developed by engineers. And at the end, we need more engineers. And we see the tendency in the society that people are less interested in doing these studies. And that's the reason why we at least doing, and I think Boeing is doing the same. I've seen that you have running even kind of advertisement in the TV
Yes.
to get people on board, never done before.
Correct.
Yeah, right? And we do the same. We are also using social media to be more in contact with the young generation. And I think together we are able to tell a very good story to them. We can sell a very good story. We are developing green flying. It's the future of mobility. It's the future of connecting worldwide with people. So cannot be only the internet, must be also the aviation industries. And we need to use it more to connect and to attract to the young people.
Okay. That's the Airbus view. How is the Tier 1 dealing with the situation?
Well, it's very comparable at the end of the day. It's the same tool set. We are even working together through the BDLI. So there is, I would say it's the same tool set, the same logic which we apply. Just maybe then to add on, it's the attractiveness of the workplace itself as well, which counts. And obviously the aviation industry is still an interesting field to work. Also now with all the variation, I mean, Andreas nicely mentioned a lot of the challenges and the beauty of eVTOLs, where people would like to work in startups. So I mean, the industry is very rich of challenges. what Andre said, we need to find the right channels, and these are now different to the years before to address the right people, because some companies are not known and we need to make known ourselves. And maybe that's the biggest difference between a OEM like Airbus and a company like Diehl. You are less known, so you need even to be more active in the social media, in direct, let's say direct sourcing of people and attracting the people.
A problem in the workforce is also that we have new regulations. For me, it's like every day something new, or every year something new. How would you assess the current regulation and requirements for the documentation in the aviation industry? Because all of you are affected of that.
I mean, what I'm always saying, on the one hand side, we are ramping up. In itself, it's a challenge. So it's a high-speed train which is running. Then we speak about sustainability, so we try to change the wheels and the whole appearance of that fast-running train. And then we have some nice regulations, especially coming from the EU, which is putting a lot of burden. And there is a real dilemma. I mean, there are some engineers, either they work on the sustainable solutions or they work on the regulations. Both in parallel is hardly possible. So there is a dilemma in which we are in, which we are working against. But I mean, all this let's say, one example is PFAS, or the last sanction package on steel and iron. I mean, the documentation effort. So we are pulling the engineers away to make our products compliant, and at the same time they cannot work on sustainability. So that's a real issue we are facing. Maybe it's a bit better in the US, I don't know, but the EU regulation is not helping here at all.
Okay.
I can only confirm. I would say all governments in the EU have stated they want to ease and simplify the system. So all have said this, and I've not seen one rule at the end stopped or changed in the advantage for the industries to have an easier documentation. And that's one of the issues we have. The second one is really, it could be easier to do all these documentations if we could use more digital systems, data exchange, but it stops always in front of the governmental administration because they're still using paperwork. So we are producing only, I will not say only, but we are producing a lot of paperwork only for the governmental administrations and not for us. I think under us we can really exchange data, and we are able to do so. But whenever you ask for permission to build a building or whatever, you have this type of paper and send it to them, and then there's sitting a poor guy who has to check all this paper. So that's unbelievable. So it's a lot of, let's say, politicians which are announcing something, but doing is a different topic.
Would we need specific trainings for our engineers to support this?
Yes. And like Jörg have said, it's a little bit weird. We have not enough engineers, but they are not working on technology. They need to do trainings to follow the regulations and to fill out these documents and these requests. That's a difficulty on the situation. And on top, and I think that's often forgotten, also in the administration normally, with all this complicated requests, you need an engineer who can check this documentation, because, let's say, common worker in administrations cannot do it anymore. So they have also problems to get engineers on the job. So this is a system which is, you see a little bit maybe my emotions, but this is a circle you cannot get out of it if not once someone is really deciding to stop this.
And with a mixture out of all of that, what we are now discussing, we have a question from the audience about the ramping up cost, or the ramping up costs a lot of money, payment terms of 60 plus days, up to 120 days. high interest rates, you already mentioned that, increased cost, race for talents. How can we expect this to work if we do not change some basics? Or maybe also to add, who is paying for that? What's your view on that, Jörg?
Well, it's describing the dilemma, and it's a dilemma in which we are in. I mean, as a tier one, you are indeed somewhere squeezed between the OEM and your sub-tiers. We said it, we are building buffers, we are building consignment stocks, so we are really trying to mitigate all possibilities, and this is costing a hell of money. I mean, we are sitting on the pile of WIP, of inventory, and we heard it in the session before. That's not sustainable in itself. So a big issue. I said it, the high interest rates are killing many small companies because, I mean, they have a lot of debt through COVID. They were supposed to pay it back. Now they even cannot raise the money to pay it back. So there is a dilemma which we need to address throughout the whole value chain. I would say from the lowest tier up to the OEM, and we need to find common solution how we can mitigate it. It says, do we need to change basics? I'm not sure. We cannot change inflation, but it's simply a fact. It's there. So how to address what is a realistic approach towards inflation? How can we collaboratively, and the word of collaboration was raised several times, it only goes if we work together addressing all these topics combined and not everyone for itself. If everyone tries to survive in this dilemma, it will not work. So all the several panels we have heard, it's transparency, it's collaboration together, then we might be able to address the point. The dilemma itself will not go away.
Mm. Barbara, you from your OEM perspective, how would you answer this point, or what advice could you give a supplier from your side?
You know, I know payment terms have been a big topic of conversation. You know, so Boeing has worked to put programs in place, you know, our city financing to help alleviate some of the longer payment terms to allow suppliers to get their money faster. We work with small businesses and, you know, to provide them different payment terms because we do differentiate, you know, between the smaller and the larger companies and the ability of cash flow. But again, you know, the race for talent, we are looking at how do we collaborate with our suppliers to bring the talent in, right? You know, every supplier can't do it alone. So how do we partner with different agencies to bring them together, to bring them, you know, with our suppliers to help with that? You know, high interest rates, you know, I think we've hit the peak, and I think we're going to start to see that come back down. So how do we look at that more long-term? What are some different strategies we can put in place? We haven't been able to answer that yet. I think there's still a lot of discussion going on. You know, and we work with suppliers on an individual basis because they're all common issues, but each supplier situation is different. So you know, we put things in place to help them, but we haven't come up with a total solution to deal with high interest rates, the increased costs. We're kind of right now dealing with it as we see it to solve the problem.
Mm. And Andre, how's Airbus dealing with the situation? I think you have also several discussions on that point with your suppliers.
Yes, for sure, but as Jörg and Barbara has already said, it's all about communication and collaboration openly about such topics. We cannot change the boundary conditions. We have to accept it and we have to live with it. But for sure, my colleagues, and I know in the supply chain, they are really close to the suppliers and they are really discussing, and they are open also discussing if there are financial issues or whatever. So here we try to help each other and to find common solutions. This is important. The whole system, like we have said at the beginning, is becoming more and more complex, and for sure the lower you are going in the tier 1, 2, 3 something, it's becoming more and more difficult, and we have also to recognize that maybe not the OEMs and not the tier 1s, but other suppliers, they have also issues to get money out of the financial system because the rating is becoming more difficult. So even there in the finance and the rating, which we have to follow, we need to keep an eye on it.
I think one point of that, which also goes in that direction, is the topic about technology development, digitalization, because it makes things easier, quicker, maybe also cheaper. We say also digitalization could be a key enabler for the ramp up. Do you have from your company a good example where it really works well? And what could your supplier learn from that? Barbara, do you have some good examples for us?
Yeah, we are working on putting, and I think we won't be alone, putting control towers in place to take data and use it to predict indicators so we can see what's coming at us. So that's one of the items that, where we're taking all of the information we have, feeding it together to provide those predictive indicators of risk. And so that's one of the areas we're using digitization. We're looking at digitization, for future, and how do we put those tools in place now to help future programs. But I think a lot of it gets back to what we talked about earlier. Sometimes it's back to basics, and sometimes the most effective thing at a supplier are their quality cost boards where they do their stand-ups every day. And so then the trick is, how do you relay that information back to the tier ones, the OEMs, to put into their systems? And I think that's some of the challenges we have, is not imposing some of the additional digital requirements on these suppliers if what they have, their daily stand-ups, where they get their entire teams in front of these boards and walk through their daily metrics. And so I think that's the challenge we're facing, is not overly burdening some of our smaller suppliers, our tier twos, with the digitization right now, but enabling that information to flow to us.
Okay, thanks a lot. Jörg, how is it in Diehl? Do you have a good example for us?
I mean, it's not too sophisticated. I mean, we speak digitalization and always look at the full bright solution. It would already be good if we start to use what is somehow available. And for example, we are not perfectly cascading the demand automatically with predefined lead times into the supply chain, nor does the sub-tiers. But the tools are existing, are there, so this could be done. Another example where we start to work on and are in the middle of it is basically to have a full 3D engineering process. It starts with, at the front, with MBSE, so get rid of the tons of specs, but start with a functional description, and then you have automatic data which translate in your design solutions and then basically in your bill of material. So for me, two easy examples. Tools are available, solutions are available. Now it's a consequent application of the possibilities we have.
More or less the same view. I think first to the outside world and supply chain, we do more or less the same with watchtowers, and I think Jürgen Westermeier would be the candidate who could answer this more in detail. So it's all about exchanging data and using common systems, where we sometimes struggle because we have not everywhere common systems, and where we also sometimes struggle because exchanging data, there are also regulations behind and a question of IP rights or whatever. So this needs to be done carefully, but what is the, let's say, one part of the solution externally, internally for sure. It's important to follow the part. Where is the part? So using digital system in the logistics area, which is really most important one from my point of view, because at the end, the part needs to be finally at the worker, so he can take the part and do the assembly. And if we know in the full chain where the part is, when the part is coming, if it's delayed or not, we can react and we can correct. So this is something where we use a digital system and data exchange. And for sure also directly in the hangar for the blue collar. For them it's also a huge change, and we should not underestimate what does it mean for the people. But today we are doing paperless production, more or less. They have their mobile phone, they have an app, they can use the app, they can stamp their work automatically, they can raise an issue in the system, and then the issue should be solved. So it's a change internally, it's a change in the internal flow, and it's a change in the external flow on how to work together with the supply chain.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've provided a lot of tools to have the suppliers provide that information, and it's just the standard work. Because again, you know, if they can provide when that part is coming in, we can get our people ready, ensuring that part gets to the airplane on time. Again, using the RFID so we can track it through our factories. You know, using the tools we have for start on time. You know, did you start on time? So can I expect it on time? Because I think some of the basic tools are there, the simple stuff to help that digital information flow from, hey, are you ordering your raw material on time? Are you starting your production on time? Are you shipping it to me on time? Meaning, can I get it to the aircraft on time? And it's really, I think, it's just starting to ensure that we're using all those tools that are currently available to us.
Okay, thank you very much. So today is the 6th of December, so today we are celebrating Nikolaus or Nikola. If you would have one question free to suppliers, to the authorities, to government, what would it be? As today is Nikolaus.
One wish or one question?
One wish.
One wish. I put my shoe yesterday evening in front of the door, but there was nothing in this morning. So I'm a little bit disappointed. And if you have seen my emotion, I want to see one example where we really cutted a burden rule from the administration and the government. That would be quite appreciated from my side. And it's very simple one. You can put it really even in my shoes, as I have not so big feet. So would work.
Phew, that's a big question. Lots of wishes. I think to work with all of our suppliers to enhance the relationships to get to that collaborative point. I was in an executive workshop yesterday, and one of the questions was about trust and transparency. And I think it's my wish would be to be able to get to that point with all of our suppliers, that trust and transparency as we continue to do business.
I found in my shoes a lot of nuts.
Yeah, you're in a better situation
I'm in a
than
better
me.
situation than you were, so I will enjoy the nuts tonight.
Because you have slept at home and I have slept in my nice flat in Finkenwerder.
My strong wish is a full, strong, supported collaboration all along the value chain.
That really sounds good. So maybe coming to the end, summarizing a little bit. So we have a lot of challenges during the ramp up. Collaboration is one major topic. Transparency alongside the supply chain, also a big, big topic. Operational excellence, but also coming back to the roots, I would say. You talk about lean, stabilization, quality. So what is the core of aviation industries? So my wish also for Nikolaus would be that we really focus in aviation during the ramp up, which will come in the next couple of months and years, which will be really tricky for all of us, that we really focus on these topics and make it a big success, because now we have the opportunity to do all of that. And I would say thank you very much. Thank you also to the audience for your questions. And I would say let's start now in the next coffee break, a networking event. I think there are a lot of questions from the audience directly to you. So thank you very much for your participants today. And yeah, let's have some good discussions.